Hi, everyone. I thought I'd share a tip that I learned this morning that I haven't seen anywhere else. So could be useful if you do digital marketing, online marketing, run websites, especially for B2B technology companies, software companies, and the like. And it has to do with generative answer engine optimization, or GEO. So what do we mean by a generative answer engine? It's things like, of course, ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, Claude, and so forth. We use these all day, every day, but how has search changed in light of that? And why should we even care? Well, what's interesting, and I didn't realize this until I just started preparing for this video, is that nearly 9 in 10 buyers are now using GEO, Generative Engine Optimization, sort of the AI version of SEO, for vendor discovery, comparison, validation. 9 in 10. The highest numbers I'd seen before were like 65 or 70%. So clearly, if you're not doing GEO in 2025, then clearly you need to be doing that as an online marketer. So GEO is super important, and there's a lot of guides that have kind of come out on this, but what I'm about to share has not really been covered in any of the guides that are out there. And a lot of these guides kind of are honestly a rehash of traditional SEO content, like EEAT. We've been talking about this for over a decade, or things like, build domain authority by getting mentioned alongside competitors and industry guides. Sure, we know domain authority is the thing. Make sure your site is fast and easy to crawl, especially for mobile. All these things we've heard about, right? But what is new is something called LLMs.txt. And so if you're not familiar, LLMs.txt is to geo what robots.txt is for SEO. So it's a plain text file formatted as markdown, which is sort of if you're not familiar with markdown, it's basically a plain text file format that's readable by both humans and bots. And it basically sort of outlines the useful content on your page, minus any HTML or XML or JavaScript that might be in your page. So it's just the raw content, the raw tokens that you could feed to the LLM. So that's LLMs.txt. But what I was wondering about is, okay, A, does LLMs.txt really actually being used, or is it just one of these standards that maybe gets proposed and gradually dies out and is abandoned? So in trying to answer that question, I went to lms.txt.site, and it turns out I found that none other than Anthropic is using LLMs.txt. So the doc team probably talked to the bot team, and they agreed that yes, it would be very helpful if they created LLMs.txt, because then the Anthropic bot would go ahead and consume that. So if we go ahead, okay, great. So we know that LLMs.txt, if Perplexity is doing it, also, by the way, or not Perplexity, if Anthropic is doing it, great. Also, Perplexity is doing it. So far, OpenAI is not. If I do ChatGPT, no. So far, Google as a company is not. I guess, is Microsoft doing it? Nope. Is XAI doing it? No. But again, Anthropic and Perplexity are doing it, so that's good enough for me. So, okay, so it matters. So then the question is, how do you create this? Well, let's look at, if we go back to Anthropic, okay, so docs.anthropic.com, lms.txt, that's their LLMs text file. Let's take a look at that. And so in digging into some of these, so don't be alarmed by this. It's basically plain text, right? So one hashtag, quick intro to Markdown. One hashtag means a title. Two hashtag or hashes or pound signs means a subtitle. And then a dash means a bullet point. So it's basically a bulleted list, right? Simple as that. So get API key. This is the title of a document. And then in hard brackets, in round brackets, we have the URL. And so you have the usual, here's the domain, docs.anthropic.com, English, API, admin API, API keys, get API key.md. .md stands for Markdown. Okay. Now, if you look at some of these things that talk about API keys and APIs in general, they tend to be not that readable as humans. They're probably really good for code generation. So what I did was I looked for something around that was more human readable. So basically something talking about the Bedrock API, Amazon Bedrock API. So this is how Bedrock is one of the ways in which you can run API on AWS. Okay. So what we did was, first of all, just pulled up the web file, which is essentially everything but the .md at the end. You can see, okay, here's the human readable page, okay, and here is the markdown page equivalent. So what I've learned is what Anthropic is doing for their LLM's text file is they're basically taking their pages, stripping out all the HTML, and just having the raw text. So, and you can see that here. You can see Bedrock API is the header, Bedrock API is the header. So you sort of strip out all this kind of header information here at the top, like the menu and the breadcrumbs, and then anything at the bottom, like the footer, was this page helpful? So it goes from PDF support guide to this header here. And you can see the same thing here. Header all the way to PDF support guide. So that's what they're doing. Just kind of the meat in the middle of the sandwich, if you will. Okay. And then looking a little further, I found out about this blog post by a company called Mintlify. So Mintlify, they're sort of a next generation or modern documentation platform. Looks really cool. I don't use them, but they seem to be really, again, when I've looked in the past, they seem to be pretty interesting. And so what they talked about was that it turns out they collaborated with Anthropic to create the LM's text standard. And what's interesting, or at least promote the standard, it maybe, I don't know if they created it, but they're certainly promoting it in this blog post. And then also there's this notion, so LLMs.txt points to a list of markdown files for each, where each markdown file is a documentation page. Anthropic goes one step beyond that. And what they do is they have something called LLMs-full.txt, which is all of their documentation in one single text file that can easily be consumed by any LLM, and therefore more easily give answers to this. And I should step back and say that one of the reasons why we're focusing so much on docs is that oftentimes your first buyer for technology is going to be a technical buyer. They might be a developer, they might be an architect, but they're going to be technical, and they want to go ahead and find technical information, not a lot of marketing fluff, but just get the answers they need. And that content tends to be in your documentation. It's factual, it's detail oriented, it's complete. So that's why documentation is so important to LLMs. And in fact, you should be thinking, if you're a marketer, you should be thinking of documentation as one of your most important pieces of marketing material out there. And so if you're not already in close contact with your docs team, you really should be, because they're a huge part of your company's go-to-market, and therefore your revenue generation, and therefore your success. Documentation is absolutely crucial. And I don't think the documentation teams out there get enough credit for how much they help companies with their revenue generation. Anyway, so LLMs full.txt, let's take a look at that. So docs.anthropic.com, LLMs full, and you can see it's a massive file. I'm scrolling through here, and you can see on the right-hand side the moving. It's a lot of content, but you would never read this as a human. But if you're an LLM, you're going to slurp this in, you're going to get all the tokens, and it's going to help you a lot with being able to answer questions. So the next question is, how do you do this for your own site? So it turns out that, so again, tools to create markdown version of entire site for consumption by generative AI engines. So it turns out if you want to do individual pages kind of ad hoc, you can go to r.gina.ai / and you can convert a page. So I tried that. So we use, at my company Zeta, we use Zendesk for our documentation. And you can see this page, a quick start guide. So I just plugged that into this Gina page, and you can see, there we go, quick start. And so now we've got this page all nicely converted. So thank you, Jina.ai, for doing that. That's really cool. But the thing is we have hundreds of these pages. So the next question is, okay, great to do it on one-off, and maybe it's handy to kind of have that in your back pocket. But there's a number of other tools to create entire websites. So Simple Scraper was listed first, so I checked that out. And yeah, they seem to allow you to create an entire website as markdown data. Just plug it in to here, and it'll crawl and give you hopefully all the markdown that you need. So looking at their pricing, I don't know how much it would cost for us to scrape our entire site, but these are their monthly prices. And anyway, it'll be worth checking out. So anyway, that's the tip. Again, to sum up some of the main points here, LLMs.txt is crucial, even though you might see some people saying, well, we're not sure about LLMs.txt. I don't know, man. If if Anthropic and Perplexity are doing it, I think that's as good a endorsement I think is necessary. Number one, docs super important for LLMs and getting answers. Remember that your first buyers are going to be technical, and they're going to be asking questions that can be answered in the docs. And remember, 9 out of 10 technical buyers are using generative AI engines to do the research. And so you want to be able to do this in automated fashion. And tools like Simple Scraper, et cetera, are great. By the way, I'm not, this is an unpaid post. I'm not paid by Jina or Simple Scraper or anybody who you've heard here. This is just me sharing some tips. Anyway, let me know what you think. If you've done this, I'd love to hear from you so I can continue learning and sharing tips that I've learned. So thanks a lot and hope it was helpful. Thanks.